welcome to another episode of Teaching with Inquiry Live. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'm sorry I am a little bit later. I was getting something very special ready to go for you, so stay tuned to the end because I have a gift for you that you can sign up for. So just hold on to the end. Tonight, I want to talk about the things that if you're like me, you're probably thinking ahead. You finished your report cards. Maybe they've come back yet from your principal who's edited them, but you've got a little bit of time. So what am I doing with my time these days other than frantically trying to get through all of my curriculum? But I'm also thinking ahead to next year. And I've noticed a lot in the comments about things that people want to give it a try for this next coming school year. So I wanted to come live tonight and talk about, I think it's the 6 things that you could try in your classroom next year that would be easy and manageable for you to do. So we're going to cover a few things tonight. So hopefully one of them will be something that you want to give a go. I highly recommend that you not try to do all of them. But if you've done some of them in the past, try to either go deeper into that or to try something new, but really only try one new thing at a time. Because if you try way too many things, then your chances of it not working are going to be much, much higher. So if you are new to Teaching with Inquiry Live, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Patty. I am a 4-5 split grade teacher here in Ontario, Canada, and I come live every single Monday night to talk about using inquiry-based teaching strategies in your classroom, hopefully to make learning and teaching more fun and engaging for both you and your students. So thanks again for joining me. So let's jump right in. The 6 things that I think you should consider trying for next school year. The first one, it's going to be a surprise, but it's inquiry. Now, inquiry can take many different shapes and forms in your classroom. Inquiry doesn't necessarily mean that you stand in front of your classroom, give them a topic, and let them go. There's a lot of different ways that you can use inquiry-based teaching strategies in your classroom. Building in conversations, communications, collaborations are a great way to begin inquiry. Inquiry can happen whether it is in a small idea or whether it is something larger. So you can inquiry inquiry-based teaching in one 20-minute learning period where you start and finish a little bit of inquiry. Or you can do a major project that takes an entire month where students are really working towards learning on their own. In essence, inquiry-based teaching, simply boiled down to its most simplistic form, is leading students on a path to find the answers to their own questions. Now, if you're just getting started with inquiry, one of the things that you can try is a very small inquiry. Getting students to start their learning by asking a question, giving them a topic, and then having them ask questions, what they wonder, what they already know, what they still want to find out, and then giving them the resources in which they can answer some of those questions is a great simple way to dip your toe into starting inquiry. Once you realize that students are capable of finding the answers to their own questions and you see their excitement as their own questions are answered, they take ownership of their learning and they are in control. And you are simply leading them and guiding them along that path instead of dragging them kicking and screaming behind you. It makes for a much more meaningful teaching and learning environment. Now, as you move forward, you can begin to extend the complexity of that inquiry assignment. For me, I've been using inquiry-based teaching strategies for a few years now, and I still start really small every September and get my students used to using inquiry-based learning and having them make that shift from a traditional teaching method to a more inquiry-based classroom. And by the end of the year now, I can simply give my students a task and they can then find the answers through research to their own questions and present their learning and share their knowledge with others. But it does take time throughout the year to build that. If you are brand new to inquiry, I do have a free Inquiry 101 course that you can find on my website. If you go to www.madlylearning.com, my Inquiry 101 course, there's 6 different modules that you can go through that talk about the different stages and how to implement inquiry-based learning in your classroom. And that's totally for free. You just have to sign up and it gets delivered to your email inbox. The second thing I think that we as teachers need to try more is hands-on learning. Using a variety of whether it's STEM or whether it's experiments in the classroom or even field trips for that matter, I think using more experiential learning and things that students can get their hands on and do in order to discover the answers to their questions is a really great way. Now, this often is easiest to do in science because we can use experiments. So experiments don't necessarily need to be difficult or overly complicated or really chaotic and messy either. Some of the best experiments are the simplest experiments. Now, you can do experiments where your students are doing the experiment themselves, or you can have a teacher demonstration where you have them all sitting in a circle and you're doing it together. Some of my very favorite experiments are also really inexpensive and can use some household found items. Some of the ways that I have the materials for my science experiments is, number one, I will often ask for students to bring in certain materials to help out or to donate different household items such as vinegar, baking soda, food coloring, balloons, what is that? Play-Doh is another good one that you can, or cups. Cups are really great because containers to pour liquids into. But some of my very favorite experiments that I do are textbook bridges for my structures and forces unit, where students take math textbooks and try to build a bridge out of those textbooks that span between 2 desks or 2 tables within the classroom, where I give them no information other than their previous experiment or previous experience with, say, knowledge of tension and compression. So they have to apply the knowledge they have of tension and compression to understand how they're going to construct their bridges. Inevitably, they build and fail and build and fail and build and fail. But eventually, they can use those experiences to construct a bridge that does span across those desks. And in fact, I've even had some students that can build a bridge out of textbooks that can actually hold one of their smallest classmates. And that takes no other materials other than textbooks, which you may or may not be using in your classroom. Another favorite science experiment that I do is a ping pong ball shooter, which uses a ping pong ball that I get at the dollar store and reuse every single year. It is a plastic cup and a balloon. If you stretch the balloon over top of one end of the plastic cup and cut the paper cup, and cut the bottom off of the other end of the cup so that you've got a tube, and you put the ping pong ball into the shooter, pull back on the balloon and let it fly. Now, this requires a little bit more management because you are essentially getting your students to build weapons. But when you tell them you're building weapons in science, they get really excited. But they also get to understand the difference between potential and kinetic energy, which is awesome. So, and my third favorite experiment that I do is with flashlights. And simply students bringing in flashlights, learning about how light travels, as light travels in a straight line and light can reflect off of shiny surfaces and is absorbed by other materials, is getting students to create a path or a tunnel that light can travel using flashlights and mirrors. And this year I was able to use some of my kids' fort building equipment, and with their little sticks, and they attach into these balls that have holes in them, so one of those fort kits. I think at some point everybody with kids under 10 has probably been given these fort kits for Christmas or birthday parties, and sometimes they sit because they're not often used, but they are great to make a light tunnel that students have to get light to travel from one end to the other if you just throw a blanket over top of it. And my students really had to work to figure out how that light from the beginning of their tunnel was going to get to the end of their tunnel, and all they were given was flashlights and mirrors. Sometimes getting students to learn with their experiences and learn through experimentation, especially in science, is a great way to get more engagement in your classroom and to really make the science and the learning come alive for students and make it really meaningful. So I encourage you that if you haven't used a lot of science experiments in your classroom, don't be afraid of the mess and a little bit of chaos, that you can, in fact, have really great learning happening with a little bit of mess and chaos in your room. The third thing that I think is important to try is to add more voice and choice into your program in all subject areas. So giving your students choice in their activities that they're completing, giving them a voice so that they can express their own ideas and they feel as though that they have ownership in their classroom and that their voice matters and is important, that they're not simply just sitting back passively involved in this learning every single day, but they are active contributors to the learning within your classroom. So giving students more time for voice and choice. So how can you do that? Number one, the easiest strategy is to provide a choice board. So for example, in literacy, I will give choice boards for writing so students can choose a topic that either the center, it looks like a bingo card on my choice board, and in the center is free choice, but around the outside are different writing forms, such as a newspaper or a story or a biography, a persuasive text, or a speech or a procedural text, and I give them story ideas, and each and every week students can choose from one of those pre-given activities from me that relate to the read aloud of the week, or students can choose a free choice and choose a topic on their own. This allows students to have a large amount of buy-in into what they are working on. So they are able to love what they're doing, and I often find that this is the biggest way to combat reluctant writers, is to give them more choice and flexibility in what it is that they're writing about, because it's interesting to them, so they're going to do it more often. Another way is with reading response. This year, one of the things I tried is giving choice in reading response. So I have a choice board for reading response questions that students can read the text for guided reading. So with the reading response choice board, what I do is I look at the curriculum expectations within the reading for meaning section of the curriculum. And I look at some of the comprehension strategies, so determining importance, making connections, summarizing, analyzing text, and evaluating text, point of view. And I try to come up with a general question or prompt that would fit a fiction text for each one of these questions. When students read the guided reading text, which I also double up as the text that they respond to each week, they get to choose their own question. So if they didn't make any connections to the story, then that's not the question they're going to choose. And if they made some inferences, then maybe that's the question they're going to choose. My goal is that they use that choice board like a bingo card, and that they attempt to write a response for each one of those questions. I find that this has really helped students this year to be a bit more engaged in what they're responding to, because they have a little bit of choice. I often find it's inauthentic sometimes to even write a reading response, but it's really great for assessment. So that's why we do it as teachers. However, I think with a reading response, sometimes you might not connect to a story that's selected, or you might not have an inference. And I found in the past that sometimes what I would do is I would just focus on one reading strategy at a time And I would ask a question that was only related to that reading strategy for a certain text, because it's what I thought was the most important reading strategy that could be extracted from that text. What I found this year is that, in fact, just because I've made a connection to a text doesn't necessarily make it meaningful for my students who come with a different experience to the classroom. So giving them a little bit more choice in the question that they respond to has been really helpful in there. I also think it's important for large projects that not every student in your classroom should produce a product for their project that looks the same. Every student should do something that is relevant to them and focuses on their strengths. This might mean that they make a video, or that they make a slideshow, or they make a poster, or they make a diorama, or they do a speech. All of those are options. For assessment purposes, for major projects, I focus not on the product that's produced by students, but on the content within what they've produced. So I'm assessing their content knowledge, their ability to apply what they learned through research to make sense of it, to be able to explain what it is that they've worked on, not necessarily what it looks like. And I find that this is allowed for a lot more choice and better results for my students, because they can choose the project that best suits their style of learning. The next one that I find is really important that I think you should give a try is building community. In particular, having community circles. If you are not somebody that regularly has community circles, I find that this is really helpful to kind of deal with problems in your classroom before they even begin. So in my classroom, a community circle, and I'm sure in many other people's classrooms, a community circle is where you all sit down on the carpet or in your group area, maybe it's on chairs, but you sit in a circle and you have a conversation, whether it's glows and grows or 2 stars and a wish, however you want to phrase it. But students have the opportunity to air grievances, but also celebrate successes. Now, at the beginning, you can give them more of a narrow focus, but sometimes it's interesting just to hear their grievances. And generally, they're not always against you. Sometimes they are, and sometimes you have to listen really with an open heart, as students might not like something that you've had planned or that you have implemented in your classroom. And I think it's good for us to actually listen to that feedback if it's presented in a respectful way, of course. But it's also interesting to hear students really hold each other accountable in these community circles and feel like they're safe. Now, your first community circle is generally very surface level because they don't trust one another. But the purpose of these is to build trust amongst your students and have them feel like they're part of the team that is your classroom. Another way I can do this is through classroom management programs. So if you use a classroom management system or program in your class, I think to build community, it's better to focus on building positive community through group, the whole group or small group, instead of individual rewards where they're competing against one another. I really think if our goal is to build a community where students trust one another and are willing to work with one another, and we want them to be able to work with everybody in the class, that we should probably move away from individual rewards in our classrooms where students end up competing against one another, because that does almost the opposite of creating that positive community in our classroom. One of the things I use is Kudos Club, and Kudos Club is a way that students work as a whole group to earn points for a whole class reward. Now, students don't ever lose points, they only gain, so the purpose is to be positive, but they can give points away to somebody else who I've called Count Snag It, and Count Snag It will steal points when students have forgotten rules and routines in the classroom. But once those points are earned, I don't take those away. So if you want to learn more about the Kudos Club, you can go to www.madlylearning.com/Kudos Club. Pretty sure that is the web address. If it's not, I'll fix it and put it in the comments. Another one I think most people are really interested in trying is flexible seating. Now, flexible seating is awesome. I love having flexible seating choices in my classroom. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have really fancy furniture. Flexible seating just means that during independent work time, you give students the choice of where they work and how they work. Now, that doesn't necessarily require any additional furniture. Kids can be really crafty with where they work. Sometimes students want to work behind my door. There's a tiny little space between the door opening and the wall, and students like to sit there. They like to sit under their tables. They like to flip their chairs over and use it as a lounger. They will sit under my desk. They will lie on the floor, and they don't seem to care what was on the floor. They'll lie on it anyways. Now, I also have some furniture in my classroom, but I don't have any of the fancy flexible seating furniture that you would see in catalogs. So a lot of furniture catalogs that sell furniture that's meant for flexible seating, they're really pricey, and I'm not sure that they're necessary. When I'm looking for flexible seating furniture, I look for two things. One, it should be wipeable, or it should be washable. Something I can take off and throw in the washing machine. So I have wooden chairs with pillows, and the pillowcases are washable, and the pillows themselves, because they're pillows, are encased in one of those plastic super heavy duty bed bug covers so that I can rip off the cover and wash it, and nothing's really permeating into the pillow. And after a while, if it is looking kind of gross, then I'll just chuck it, because it didn't cost me very much at all in the first place. So using something that is wipeable and sanitizable, or it's washable, are my two rules. So the best places to look for furniture that is wipeable and washable is Facebook Marketplace. People are often getting rid of furniture that they don't want in their house, but it's totally okay for your classroom. I find that I don't necessarily need furniture in my classroom that I would put in my house. Sometimes you can get furniture at garage sales, or if people are moving, they also might be getting rid of furniture. Wooden chairs, wooden benches, plastic furniture. There's plastic chairs at IKEA. You can also grab the Muskoka chairs from, say, like Canadian Tire or Home Depot, would also work, because they're wipeable. So I like wipeable, and they're pretty sturdy too. Wooden chairs are often sturdy, and if they're not, it's just a matter of getting some Gorilla Glue and stealing one of these. Maybe you're like me and you just take some tools with you. I think that if you can get your hands on those items, that you will be set, and you can plan out where they're going to sit in your classroom, how they're going to be used. And now this is often a big question, is how are you going to use flexible seating in your classroom? Well, I look at there really being three different ways. Number one is the totally open model. You have places to sit, and students come in and choose one, and it could be a different place every day, and you don't necessarily have a home base for your students, that they just can come in and choose where they're going to sit. That sounds lovely, but I'm not sure it's going to happen in my classroom. Not yet. The other option, one of the other options is home base, so giving students a home base, but the plus is that they get to kind of, during independent work, it's free choice where they're sitting. So out of all of your flexible seating options, it's kind of a first come, first serve model of where they're going to sit. The third is a home base with rotations like a center. So it's far more controlled and rigid in structure, but you still have the flexibility of allowing them to sit in different areas. This is what I do. So I have, each student has a home base, but they also have a rotation schedule that allows each table group to sit each one of the days of our 5-day cycle at one of the 5 different options. Now, there also are 2 options that are floaters, which means that they can sit on the carpet at any point in time they want, and they can also sit on yoga mats around the room anywhere they want. So you've got a bunch of different choices there. So each day they might have a different option, and there's 6 people at the group, but you might not, and then there's 6 people at each table group, as well as 3 learning periods a day. So each learning period should have 2 different people experiencing that flexible seating area. Now, some people never use it. Some people use it all the time, but the schedule helps to get students to understand who gets to sit where. And I found that that is the way that I can best manage flexible seating in my classroom. And the last tip that I have for you for what you could consider doing for September is going digital. So this means to make tech a part of your routine daily. It doesn't mean going to the computer lab and playing games. It means making tech accessible when learning happens. So if you have access to tech, try to see if you can get tech in every day in one of your subjects. So whether it's science and social studies, which would probably be my first choice, or language, getting tech in daily, I think, is an imperative step for you going digital. You don't necessarily need to be one-to-one, but if you're not one-to-one, you should have a type of sharing system where students are assigned to a specific iPad, because it's a lot easier to track for you as a teacher. It's also important if you are having students complete assignments digitally, so not just using the tools for research or for other things, but if you're getting them to create something on a digital device, then you want to have a learning management system or LMS such as Google Classroom to manage all of that paperwork digitally. You don't necessarily want them just plopping it in a folder on Drive or on OneDrive or Google Drive, because that is difficult. You're not sure when it comes in and when it doesn't. Google Classroom is a great way to manage that if your board happens to allow it. So I would highly recommend using that. You can also try planning and marking digitally. If you have an iPad Pro with an Apple Pencil, using an app called GoodNotes, and will allow you to use a digital planner that's very similar in feel and look to your regular paper binder planner that you've probably used for years and years. So if you want to go digital and reduce that haul that you're bringing back and forth to school every day to home, using an app called GoodNotes with an iPad Pro and Apple Pencil will allow you to handwrite your learning plans, but in your iPad. You can also try software like Planboard or Markboard, which will allow you to do your day planning as well as your marking on an app. There's also Edosio, but if I'm completely honest, I do really like Edosio, but there's one major flaw, and that's that it only exists on one device. And for me, it's essential that I be able to transfer information from multiple devices. So I want to be able to pull up the information on my iPad or my laptop or my phone. And the fact that Edosio only works on my iPad isn't very practical for how I need to use tech. I think it's also a great idea that if you have a supportive principal or a principal looking at what they can use money for, if they have any, or you have a parent council that's looking to fundraise for things like digital goods, that going beyond getting iPads or Chromebooks, you can also look at getting digital document cameras or stands to hold an iPad above paperwork so that you can use that to project work for students. You can put a paper underneath the document camera and it projects it onto a screen. Finally, I think that it is a good idea to have contact with parents digitally. I know I'm not always supported in this view, but I love the fact that with email, I can time and date stamp when things are written. It's a private communication between myself and the parent that is not going to be put in an agenda for absolutely everyone in my classroom to see, because agendas are not kept in a secure place in my classroom. So anybody at any time can pull out an agenda and see confidential notes written back and forth between parents and myself. And that doesn't make me comfortable, so I much prefer email. Now, if you don't use email, you can also use a digital contact with parents such as Remind or Seesaw, again, if your board allows it. And if they don't, using an email service provider such as MailChimp will allow you to send emails to a large group of people. So you design the one email and it sends it out to every parent who's on your parent email list. And it's a little bit easier than sending it out, say, with your email client and just choosing a list, because they only see that it went to them. So the parents then, if you email from your regular email account, so your Google email or your Outlook email, if you email from there and you put it in the to section or in the CC section, all of your senders will see that it was sent to who it was all sent to. With using an email service provider, it looks like the email went straight from you to them. It also has a better chance of not getting put in your junk mail when you have all of the email addresses in the right spot. And if that's something you're interested in, I'm happy to go deeper into that in a future episode, talking about how to set up an email list for parents as well as a classroom website and that. So now it's time for me to share with you a free resource that I have for you. So let me see if I can share my screen here. Okay. If you go to www.madlylearning.com/free library, all one word. So that's www.madlylearning.com/free library. You will see this screen, and it doesn't look very pretty because I just figured out how to put this page up. I've been working on the resource library for a while, but I didn't know how to put this page up. So I finally figured it out, which is why I was late tonight. It doesn't look very pretty, so I'm going to fix that. But this is what you're going to see, is the free resource library. When you enter your email address and click sign up for free, you will get access to my new free resource library. So I've changed it up. I'm using a different service provider now for this, and it's a lot prettier. So let me see. So this is what you will see when you're signed up, is the free resource library, and you will see there is different categories of stuff. You have planning and organization, language arts, math resources, science and social studies resources, as well as inquiry resources. So when you click on the planning and organization, oh, you can't read that, but there's some text there. I'll have to change the font, but you can see that there's long range plans here for you. And if you go, and there'll be more things added. Language arts has some things in it. I'm not sure why they're not showing up. And math. So there's lots of different resources in here for you. So if you go again to www.madlylearning.com/free library, all one word, you will have access to this revamped resource library. If you have any problems getting in, let me know, and I am going to be playing around with it a little bit more this evening to make sure that there's a few more goodies put in there for you, especially when it comes to planning or organization, inquiry, and some language arts freebies in there as well. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you really like the resource library and you make a goal to try something new next year. One new thing that you are going to dip your foot in and get started with slowly in September as we look forward to thinking about what our classroom will look like next year. So thanks again for joining me, and we will see you next week. Bye for now.